The next topic is going to be the UIAS reports. I'm hoping nobody's rolling their eyes, but I expect anybody who has done UIAS reports before might be. But let's talk about what they are and what information they can provide to you to help ensure that your data is accurate. And, all right. So UIAS reports. Here's another acronym. UIAS stands for Unique Identifier Audit System. So what is a UIAS? The UIAS reports provide information on an individual student when your local enrollment records for that student are inconsistent with other enrollment records for that student across the entire state of New York. This information is based on the student's NYSED ID. Remember, we mentioned this earlier. The unique identifier that is assigned to a student and is used to track that student from preschool through graduation. In a perfect world, each student has one unique identifier. In reality, occasionally, the NYSED ID is not assigned correctly, or a student has more than one NYSED ID. UIAS's report is useful in trying to find those discrepancies. It finds other things as well, but it also is instrumental in finding issues with the students' NYSED IDs. So from a navigation perspective, you will get to this report through the UIAS folder. That's the reason I picked these two reports today, because they're each in their own folders and it makes it easy to get to. Well, actually, no, I picked them because they're the most frequently used reports. As with other level 2 reports, you will select criteria to determine the information that will be included in the report. And for this report, you really only need to select a school year and a district. There is no other criteria to choose from. This will generate, as we've become familiar with, a level 2 summary report, which is displayed here. It looks different than the previous summary report, but it essentially serves the same purpose. And it shows a count of errors for each use case type. Use case types are listed in the left-hand column. All right, so for each use case type that exists for your district. If there are no errors for a particular use case type, that item will not appear on the list. For some of the use case types, there are multiple subtypes that are reported. Again, you will only see those listed for which there is information to report. The count in the rightmost column represents the number of students who fall into that category. In some cases, students will display in the detailed report with multiple records, but they will only be counted once. These reports are designed to notify you of potential issues. Each use case type, which you can see listed there on the right, requires a different approach to research and resolve the problem. And it may involve you using multiple systems or applications to determine what the proper solution is to the problem. It can be quite complex to unravel what the actual error is in some cases. So you'll notice here also that the counts are hyperlinks, so you can drill down to get detailed information. You can do that based on just one use case type or one particular subtype, or you can go for broke and click on the number in this total row to get all of them put into one report. Keep in mind as you sorry, my voice is a little scratchy today. Keep in mind as you review these reports, your district's data may be correct. The problem could be with the other guys, which may make ultimate resolution of these items a bit tricky. You can always contact another district, but in some cases their responsiveness may not be what you like. New York City, but we won't mention anybody in particular. We are going to take a brief look at each of the use case types that you may see in the UIAS report. And some of the most common situations that would occur for each error type. Okay. But first, let's take a look at the header for the detailed reports. UIAS reports for all use case types will have the same header record. The specific use case type that you are reviewing will have an impact on what fields you may need to look at and the order in which you want to look at the details. The reports are basically broken into 4 sections, with the first section providing student details. Notice this is where the NYSED IDs are listed. The second section gives you information about the type of error and a description of the error, with a priority that will indicate whether it's something you should attempt to fix right away or something that may not be as big of an issue. Priorities are listed as high, medium, and low. The entry information, the next section gives entry information that shows the district of enrollment associated with the student and the entry dates. You will also see in the following section exit information for the student. As you can tell by the number of columns in the header record, there's a lot of data provided to you to help determine a resolution, if possible, to the problem. Each reported error is different, and resolving each situation may require research in multiple systems, as I had mentioned. You may want to start in your student management system. You may need to also go to the NYSED system to look up a particular NYSED ID. Level 1 can also be useful to provide information to help resolve these, and occasionally Level 0 historical can also provide some additional information. And when you're in your student management system, you may not only be looking at your students' enrollment records. You may actually need to dive down into their schedule and their attendance, and sometimes even discipline records. Believe it or not, they can all play a role in the correct resolution to a problem. Okay, I would recommend though, even though you can generate the report for all use case types using that number at the bottom in the total row, that logically you may want to approach it one use case type at a time, because you're going to be applying similar logic to each student that shows up in that category. And that sometimes facilitates processing through the records a little more quickly. All right, so the next slide.
Sam has asked a question in the chat. Can you see it, or would you like me to read it to you?
Yep.
She says, I don't know if you know this, but I know Level 0 historical updates aren't going to show on Level 2 until 12/14. Will the UIAS update then, as well as for Level 0 historical items? I checked the refresh for UIAS and it says weekly. So I wasn't sure if 12/14 was the date or if it was weekly. Do you have any idea?
And Sam, thanks for bringing that up. That's actually one of the dates that we anxiously await, because many districts have been going in and making Level 0 historical updates to resolve these UIAS issues since the UIAS reports first came out in October, and they are anxiously awaiting the point in time when the Level 0 historical updates will be incorporated, so that some of those corrected issues will actually go away and no longer show on the report. So yes, the 14th is the date we wait for, and then once the UIAS reports are updated following that date, it often clears up a number of entries within the UIAS reports. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so the next section of the presentation, we're going to talk about different scenarios that are associated with the UIAS use case types. Looking at my watch and noticing we're quickly approaching the 11 o'clock end of the meeting. But as we seem to be doing with all of our DAI sessions, we have more information we want to get out to you than what seems to be contained within the 2-hour limit. So if somebody needs to step out, I'm going to continue on and finish up the UIAS and the end of the presentation. But if you need to step out, this information will be available to you through the handouts and through the recording. But we appreciate your attendance here, and please feel free to stick with us as long as my voice holds out. I don't know why we're losing that, but anyway, all right, so let's look at scenarios for false dropouts. There are two types of false dropouts. In both cases, the use case code begins with an FD and is followed by a 01 or 02 to indicate the specific error type. This is a format that we will see through all the use case codes for all of the types. In the first case, the 01s, this occurs within the current school year. And in the second case, it spans 2 school years. So looking at our flow chart here, you'll see student is enrolled in District A in year 1. The student stops attending for whatever reason, and District A eventually will exit the student with a dropout code. Meanwhile, the student enrolls in District B in the same school year. And District B also reports that student's enrollment. Normally, a request for records would be received by your district, but well, you know, sometimes things don't always go as planned. But now, since the student has appeared in the UIAS report, you have confirmation that this student is actually enrolled in a school and therefore is not, in fact, a dropout. Since this all happened within the same school year, and that point is important, you can review the student's records and possibly update their exit enrollment to transfer to another school district if appropriate. Okay, the second false dropout case is similar, but since it spans school year, the student is exited as a dropout in year 1, and since there is no further activity for the student in year 1, the dropout will already have impacted your accountability report for that school year. So again, in all of these cases, you will have expected to receive a request for records, but I've seen scenarios where a student comes to your district, is only there for a short period of time and returns to the district they had previously attended. And in that case, the district they previously attended feels that they've got all the records they need and they don't send the request. So that's sometimes what causes this situation to exist. And if we go to the next slide and look at the details, so in this case, this particular use case type, you will see 2 records for each student. In this particular case, the error occurs within the same school year. What was unique about this, which you can't see, but I will tell you, is this student actually returned to the same district, okay? And excuse me, when the student returns, you may be able to obtain additional information. For example, if this student did not attend school elsewhere during the time from the September 23rd exit date with the dropout code to the October 13th re-enrollment date, then the records are accurate as reported, okay? If, on the other hand, when the student returns, the district finds out that the student had been enrolled elsewhere, perhaps they were out of state or at a private school, And with documentation supporting that enrollment, the district could update the dropout exit code to the appropriate transfer code. All right. Any questions on that particular scenario? There are more variations on this theme than you can imagine. And as you look at each record, you will begin to accumulate your own knowledge of all the circumstances that can occur. Okay. The next category we're going to talk about, the next subtype, is disappearing students. It's my favorite name for students that on the UIAS report. There's only one type, and here's the typical scenario. The student is enrolled in District A at the end of, in year one, and at the end of that year, the student is expected to return. So the exit code for that student for year one is EOY, or end of year. Summer happens, and we return to school in the fall, in September of year two, and the student does not return. District A then either deletes or never reports any enrollment for year two. Meanwhile, somewhere in New York State, the student enrolls in District B for year two, and District B reports that student enrollment. And so I'm going to go directly to the next slide to talk about the specifics of this. So what would need to happen, and this is what it would look like as it is reported, and you may ask why it's termed a disappearing student when the student is actually enrolled somewhere. Well, the disappearance refers to District A. The student has disappeared from District A. And in this case, what District A needs to do is do a level 0 historical, because it's last year's information, and change the exit code to the correct exit code depending on where the student is currently reported. Keep in mind the information here on the UIAS report is confirmation of that student's enrollment elsewhere, and it is legitimate to go in and update the exit code without actually having a request for record. If you choose to contact the new school and confirm that enrollment and ask them to send you specific documentation, that's fine, and that would be up to your district policy. Okay. We're going to jump ahead to the next category and talk about simultaneously enrolled students. And in case you haven't had enough of things not going according to plan, the next use case type involves students who are simultaneously enrolled in more than one district. There are a couple of subtypes for this use case. The first type of simultaneously enrolled students occurs when a student is reported as enrolled in two districts and neither district has exited the student. This is referred to as concurrent open enrollment. So, given the laws of physics, when we know that one person can't be in two places at one time, it is obvious that there is an error here. There are many, many variations on why this can occur. The simple fact is that two districts have reported the enrollment for the same student. And if we go to the detailed information on this, which helps to clarify it a little bit, if you're lucky, it may just be a timing problem. In the first set of records, the student was enrolled in District A on July 8th. That's right there in the middle. And in District B on November 3rd. Even though almost all transfers happen quickly and the data will be reported to the data warehouse and available in level 2, there are a number of places where this process can be delayed and would cause an error. In this case, I'd be willing to bet that District A has not completed the process of exiting the student. If you are in District A and you receive this error in your UIAS report, You may want to confirm that the request for records has been received and that the information will be reported to the data warehouse in the next import. If you are in District B, who will also see the same error reported on their UIAS report, you may want to confirm that the request for records has actually been sent to District A, and also confirm that the student has begun to attend school in your district. This process can be impacted by any number of circumstances. Staff illness, system outages, delays in the process. Timing is something to always take into consideration when reviewing the UIAS report. It takes time for the data to move. If you see a discrepancy due to a very recent change, there may be nothing to do except wait for the data to catch up to reality. Or it may not be a timing problem at all. The second set of records show a student enrolled from July 1st to June 30th in both districts. Depending on when you generate this report, it may indicate a problem. If you see something like this in early September, well, actually October, since that's when the UIS reports will first come out, it could be back to a timing issue. And one of the districts may not have updated their data in a timely manner. However, if it's January and the student has been enrolled in attending your district since July 1st, the other districts certainly should have ended their enrollment. You may want to contact the other district and request that their records be updated. Ultimately, as long as your records are accurate, that is all you can control. You may notice that I use the words may a lot as we discuss these problems. When trying to resolve UIAS problems, there are many different scenarios. You just need to determine which one applies to each error. And fair warning, it's not always easy or obvious. Okay. We're going to move on to the next case of simultaneously enrolled. And this is a very frequent occurrence. This occurs when we have overlapping enrollment records. We begin with a student who is enrolled in District A. The student is attending District A for days or weeks or months or years. And then District A receives a request for records from District B and exits the student as transferred to another New York State district. And that sounds all perfectly well and good. It's the way the process should work. However, meanwhile, down here in District B, the student registers and District B sends their request for records as they should to District A, and District B enrolls the student. That works well, except in the following situation. So let's go to the specifics of this, Helen. Okay, so it's fairly obvious what the problem is here, and especially since I highlighted it in red. The student exited District A on November 12th, but was enrolled in District B starting on November 4th. This overlap is what generates the error. It may be that the student actually left District A prior to November 12th. Or it may be that the student did not actually begin attending District B on November 4th. Or it may be both. There's those maybes again. In either case, you need to look at additional records within your district to see if the dates can or should be adjusted. In District A, if the student is marked absent for, let's say, all instructional days starting on, hypothetically, October 23rd, then you may be able to back up the exit date to November 3rd, the day before they enrolled in District B. Sometimes you can't do that. There are some circumstances whereby the student cannot be exited until a specific date. And you need to take that into account. Those circumstances are usually related to suspensions. I'll just mention that, and then we're going to move on and to the rest of the details here. Now, in this hypothetical situation, the student was not in attendance since October 23rd, but I only mentioned backing up the exit date to November 3rd. Why couldn't you back up the exit date to October 22nd if the student had not actually been in attendance since that date? Well, although that's tempting, the UIAS report only confirms that the student was enrolled starting on November 4th. So technically you cannot back up your exit date anything earlier than November 3rd without having additional documentation. Okay, any questions there? Like I said, that was a very common scenario. Is something that you need to just look at their attendance records in order to resolve. Okay, we're going to move on to the final case, and we're going to look at this one from a high level. The final use case type code is for false transfers, and the pattern remains the same, but there are a plethora of these type of exit codes. They're prefixed with an FT, followed by the exit code specified on the enrollment record that has been flagged, and that is followed by a subtype code of 01, 02, or 03. The subtypes indicate the reason that the exit code is not valid. In other words, why the subsequently reported data would indicate that the exit code is not correct. So let's just take one of these and discuss it briefly. Let's look at the exit code 153, which is used to indicate that a student was transferred to another location within your district or to an out-of-district placement. And if you note the subtypes that could generate an error for this exit code. If you have no subsequent enrollment reported after you use a 153 exit code, well, that's obviously an error because 153 says you're moving them to another place in your district. So it would be expected that you would then report another enrollment. If the student then shows up as enrolled in another school district, that would obviously be an error also because that's not where they're supposed to be. That's not where you told them they were going to. And then if you actually enroll the student back in the same building, that also would generate an error. And to resolve many of the false transfer errors, you may simply need to change the exit code. If the student in the case of the 153 exit code actually enrolled in another district, you're going to change the 153 to a 170 and so on. And you're going to use similar logic as we've talked about with the others to resolve these errors. And I don't have a detailed scenario here to review, but I think by now you get the gist of this. And bear in mind that you do not have control. You only have control over your own data. And you may not be able to fix some errors. They may continue to appear in the UIAS report for the entire year. And that is not uncommon. So the goal of clearing up all the errors may not be attainable. You can only control what you can control. And so do I have any questions on the UIAS report? Okay, I have a couple more slides that we're going to talk about. We're going to go back and revisit the UIAS reports as they relate to the NYSED IDs. In a perfect world, as I had mentioned before, we have one student linked to one NYSED ID. I particularly like the ID of this student over here on the left. Some of you may get that reference. I think probably a lot of you will. That was Helen's choice, and I caught on right away. So that's our perfect world. But then over on the right, we have reality. And we may have one student with multiple NYSES IDs, or we may have one NYSES ID pointing to multiple students. These errors will tend to show up in the UIAS report. If a student let's say a student exits your district with a 170, indicating they are transferring to another district. But when that student enrolls in the other district, they are linked to a second or a different NYSES ID. Your error will show a false transfer because there will be no subsequent enrollment record linked to that NYSES ID. Excuse me. Why is it important to resolve these? Well, let's say that student is a high school student and has taken Regents exams in your district. Those exams and their results are no longer linked to that student in the new district. Or on the other hand, think about the consequences of multiple students that are linked to the same ID. In that case, you may have a student showing up as having taken exams that were taken by another student. It is critically important to resolve these NYSES IDs and get as close to a perfect world as we can. You know, we here at the RIC have some experience in dealing with these, and we can assist you when you've identified students who are not set up correctly within the NYSES system. So the way you can, the NYSES system introduced a particularly, let's move on to the next one, Helen. A couple of years ago, they implemented a new search feature within the NYSES system. It is accessed through the IRS portal. Entitlements are granted through CEDOS, and student enrollment, will show you student enrollment from across New York State. You can search by a particular NYSES ID, and you will get the records associated with that ID only. Or you can enter a local student ID, and this is kind of fun sometimes. You will get a list of all students anywhere in New York State with that same local ID. It may be fun, but it's not always useful. You'll then have to search the list to find your student. And the third option, which as I said was introduced a couple years ago, was to search by first name, last name, and date of birth. And this will give students who are a specific match with that first name, last name, and date of birth. And it will also show you near matches. And this is useful, for example, if in one district you have a student with a name which is spelled just slightly different than the way that name was entered in the new district. This system will tend to find those matches and show you, and if they have multiple NYSES IDs, you will be able to determine that from the data that is returned. Due to privacy, I can't actually show you any of the search results here, but I encourage you to go to that system and try doing some searches to see the information that will come back to you. It will show where an enrollment has been reported by any district. It will not necessarily give you enrollment entry dates and exit dates, but it will give you information that you can use to continue to research a problem that is reported in the UIAS. So it takes a little bit of practice to get used to how to do efficient searches in the system, but you know, the more you try, the better you will get at it. Okay, I don't know about you, but I think we've covered quite enough for one day. Are there any questions?